Hey everybody, this is Daniel Lee with Melee Science, and I wanted to talk about something interesting. We often say that Melee, in terms of game mechanics, is a happy accident, but we later learned over time, much of the decisions made by Sakurai and the development team were very intentional, with L canceling, wave dashing, and all these little things that came together to make this awesome game known as Melee. Now, outside of that, there are many happy accidents or coincidental things that have happened to let the Melee community grow to where it is today. Now, one of the first things I really want to mention is developer support. Of course, Nintendo is no Riot Games or Valve in terms of supporting their games with these lavish prize pools and these really awesome events such as like the TI or LCS and Worlds. But nonetheless, I actually think that in some aspects, Nintendo's lack of participation up to this current point is kind of good if we were to look at the silver lining of things. What I mean is this: imagine if Nintendo, at the release of Melee, decided to implement their own rule set, implement their own events, their prize pots. Sure, on the short end of things, that looks pretty good. But the moment that Nintendo says, we're not going to support Melee anymore, we're going to move on to another game, then the community can effectively die. And because we were so grassroots from the beginning, we were able to not only develop our own culture, but our own leadership within the community. We've had people like Juggle Guy, Crimson Blur, the Genesis crew, and people throughout Melee's history step up into leadership to really demonstrate, hey, Nintendo support would be nice, but we can sustain the community on our own. Now, because of the lack of Nintendo support in the beginning, we were also able to dictate our own culture. Granted, we're a little bit more raucous, sometimes we're non-esports, and I'm pretty sure Nintendo would question, some of the decisions we've made as a community in some of our language, our lingo. And granted, we have cleaned up over the years, but we would have never had moments like Wombo Combo or all of these funny memes if Nintendo were involved in the beginning. Now, of course, one of the cool things about Melee is the timing of the game too. Melee, came out on the Gamecube in an era of systems that really wasn't known for online gaming. Now consoles today, online gaming is the norm. But the cool thing about Melee and the timing of the release was that online gameplay was not expected, meaning that people have to interact with each other, they have to go to their friends' houses, grow social skills. When you go to events, it's face to face. And it really, created this really nice community of people that are forced to interact and develop social skills. And hey, we got to meet people from all different walks of life as a result. And of course, the other thing that I pondered for a while is the timing of the release, in the sense of, if there was no Melee community and Melee was never released, there was no Smash Bros. Community, imagine the number of people in 2017 that would be willing to spend endless hours grinding tech skill, learning things like L canceling, and all the frustrating things about Melee that we just kind of grew to just acknowledge that it's difficult, but hey, we're gonna learn it. I am actually not very confident that in 2017 that people, the average user, would be willing to commit that hard to just learning game mechanics. But because we have this established history, and it comes from an era where people are willing to die 100 times to learn a level, people were willing to commit to learning and grinding the tech skill as fun, and it really enriched the gameplay of the game. The other factor that I really have to emphasize here is that the fact that, other than a few bounce changes from version to version and the PAL version of Melee, there are no bounce patches to Melee that have existed over the past 13 to 14 years of Melee's history. And so as a result, there are a lot of, balance flaws of Melee, admittedly. Fox is a really strong character. Game & Watch has some things that, could be improved with a balance patch. But as a result, we've developed this culture of no Johns, where if there's something that's really cheesy or difficult, well, you have to learn how to beat it. Rather than people crying for nerfs or crying for buffs over certain characters, or saying that this meta sucks, in other games where there are balance patches, we've acknowledged that, hey, there are no balance patches coming for this game. You're just gonna have to learn how to deal with this. And because we have such a long history with the game, we've seen counters develop, we've seen a nice meta come out, and sure, there's a lot of shenanigan-y things that I would not include if I were to design the game in the future. I don't like wobbling, but because of the fact that there are no balance patches, everyone has to learn how to deal with it, and I think that's awesome. And I think that many of the techniques that we've developed in the last couple of years would have never happened, if we always had balance patches kind of counteracting, player growth and meta development. Now, one of the cool things and the happy accidents, I have to mention is, Brawl, had its own timeline in history, but I'm actually thankful that it was very different from Melee. Because imagine if we had a game that was similar to Melee but not as good, inevitably it's not different enough that the Melee community would have stuck to Melee. They would have moved on to the next iteration of the game. And it just so happens that Brawl is so different in pacing that the Melee community stayed as it currently is, and that people stuck to the game. If it was close enough, Melee would have effectively died. And to recap all the happy little accidents that have happened, we're happy that Nintendo didn't get too involved early so we could develop our own culture and our own rule set in regards to Smash. I'm happy with the timing of the release of Melee that excluded patching and online play to continue to develop the culture and the rich metagame that we have today. I'm also happy that Brawl was so different from Melee that we were able to continue Melee's storied history even though Brawl released, which is a sequel, and that's very rare for an esport to survive a sequel. So all these factors aside, I'm really happy that these all happened and created this alternate timeline of awesome Melee-ness even in 2017. Thanks for watching Melee Science, and look forward to more episodes and more content in the future.